when I'm looking at properties, I'm looking for at least 40 to 80 grand. That's what's possible after expenses for rent-to-rent properties. And I realized at that point that you didn't need to own property to make money from it.
Welcome to Property Banter by Pinnacle Buyers Agents. Today we are talking about rent-to-rent rooming houses. We're joined by Vincent Holthouse from Ascension Rooming Houses, and we are going to discuss rent for rent. So how you can get into property without, actually buying a property. This is a very, very exciting episode. Vincent has scaled a 7-figure income from rooming. He's a coach and a mentor. This is a cracking episode. Get ready. Let's go. Vincent, Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Mate, awesome. Now, today we want to get into rooming houses.
Yep.
Now, you've done quite a few of these over the years.
Yep.
And you're actually showing people how to do this as well. And we've been following you online, and that's how we connected. Mm-hmm. We want to give people plenty of value at home in this episode about the strategies that they can use as well,
right?
If they were to do it themselves in the rooming house space. Now, obviously, it's always it's nice to be able to go ahead and buy your property. It's always nice if you can pay cash, right?
Yeah.
Or if you've got a 20% deposit or whatever.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the strategy that you could use if you actually don't have the money to buy it in cash. You don't have the cash to pay the 20% down payment to get the to get the loan from the bank to buy it. If you're just starting out in property without the funds, is there a way in which you can do it? I want to talk about that today. I want everyone to hear your story, and let's get into it.
So rooming houses, we define rooming houses as one or more rooms rented to 4 or more people. So that could be one room with 4 people in it. It could be 4 rooms with 1 person in each. And once it hits that mark, there's a registration. They technically become, in Australia, rooming houses. So it's a niche area. There's some compliance things that go along with that. Usually it's a council registration, depending on which state. And if you like, I can run into exactly which state your audience might be in and what the regulations are for each particular state.
Yep.
But generally, that's the rule of thumb. As soon as you've got your 4th room, you're going to need registration. It's not as scary as it sounds. For a while, I was in the exact position that you were just speaking about, right? So I didn't have a big deposit. I was stuck in a sales position, and I wanted a pathway out. And that's why a lot of people, I think the audience would agree, is the reason a lot of people want to get into real estate is they want to either build financial freedom, they want to be able to escape that 9 to 5, or they like their career, they're happy enough there, but they want to be investing in something. So for me, I ended up actually living in one of these rooming houses, these shared accommodations, and the owner had turned around to me one day and he said, "Vince, I remember the day it happened because I was driving down to the store and I was going to drown my sorrows in carbohydrates. I had my last $20 and I was pulling my hair out in conventional work." And he called me and he said, "Vince, you've been living in this house. You've been helping me with maintenance, like organising trades to come through. You've been helping me take bins out and stuff like that. Would you take a head lease on this property and then you can rent out each room yourself?" So I'd rushed home, ran into my room, pulled out the computer, and I'm looking at the numbers, and it's $200 per room, $300 per room, $350 in some cases. And I'm thinking, wait, I'm going to rent this place for $400.
Yeah.
So if I've got 6 rooms going for $250, let's say $280, even if it was only $200, I'm going to be able to cover my rents and make an income. So I had this big shift, this quantum shift in what I thought was possible. And I realized at that point that you didn't need to own property to make money from it. From that point, I was walking around the kitchen, I was thinking, I wonder if I could scale this. I could scale this. So again, I rushed to the computer, I pull out my phone, and I start calling through listings on realestate.com.
So you jumped onto the rental side of realestate.com?
Yeah.
So you're looking for places now. So now you've got the idea.
Yeah.
So now you're looking for places that people have for rent.
Yeah.
That have how many bedrooms?
So I'd look at 4 and 5 bedroom properties.
So 4 and 5.
Yeah. And I'd look to create extra rooms.
Nice. So you look for the bigger ones, and then you look for a certain layout as well, because you'd want a certain advantageous layout so that everyone's not on top of everyone, or you'd want maybe multiple bathrooms. What is it what are the specs that you looked for when you were on realestate.com?
Yeah, so we look for dining spaces and lounge rooms, maybe rumpus or family rooms that are quite large. There is compliance around how big they need to be.
Yeah.
But we'll look for those extra spaces where we can create an extra 2 to 4 bedrooms on top of the existing floor plan. So if it was a 5-bedroom and we create 4 rooms, let's say we take the rumpus and family and split those both into 2, and then we still have the dining and meals area for the tenants. Then essentially what we've done is created all these little micro apartments. We'll put TVs in there. We'll put beds, everything that a student would want. So they want bed, they want storage space, they want a TV, a study desk, and essentially we'd be creating that solution for them in areas of demand for a fraction of the price.
So when we have a let's say we're looking at a 4-bedroom on there, we'd want to try and look for a layout where we can convert the 4-bedroom to a 6-bedroom, and it would still have a meals and a lounge.
We'd want to shoot for at least one common space that's regulated. So by law, you need that. And we want to try and maximise... We want to minimise the common spaces and maximise the floor space inside the bedrooms. We want to move as close to studio apartments as we can. If you're renting the property, it doesn't make sense to spend 15 to 20 grand on doing 5 extra bathrooms because you can't take them with you. But if you own the place, so this applies to people who purchase it and people who want to just replace their income through rentals. So my rule of thumb when it comes to rentals is you want to be able to take anything you put in there with you when you go. And in some cases, we've even taken the timber we used to split up the lounge rooms and living rooms and stuff like that.
So you'd be taking, you obviously your televisions, your beds, whatever you've got included there, and you'd move them. So for the bigger rooming houses that are set up a certain way, and for someone that has the budget to fit out kitchens, that's a whole nother ball game. So from the perspective of someone just starting out, looking to just make some money from taking a 4-bedroom. Let's run everyone through the numbers. Let's say we go get a 4-bedroom on realestate.com. What would it rent for typically? Let's say a suburb. You're doing them now fairly, a fair bit of them in Melbourne, right? So what does a 4-bedroom that can be converted to a 6-bedroom roughly look like numbers-wise?
250 to 300 per room. So you'd rent each of those rooms out, and usually we'd be looking for more than 6 bedrooms. But if we had, say, let's say we had 7 or 8 bedrooms, you could get that 280 per piece, and you'd be paying rent of 600 to 800, sometimes a little bit more, which is good profit. Generally, when I'm looking at properties, I'm looking for at least in Melbourne 40 to 80 grand. That's what's possible after expenses for rent-to-rent properties. You have to take into account occupancy rate, so you'd be smart. I mean, you know on your feasibilities, generally you'll make room for different areas. And we make room on our feasibility for 90% occupancy. Historically, over hundreds of rooms that I've operated, that sits at about 90%. So if it was an 80 grand profit, you'd expect 90% of that. If you're getting someone else to manage it for you. So you can rent a place and have it completely managed by someone else, hands off. It costs around 15%. So the numbers will vary based on that. Like if you take out 20 grand for management or 15 grand for management and you take out 10 grand for occupancy, then all of a sudden it's looking more like 50 grand that you're going to be making on it. But it's still not terrible for a property you don't own that you've just negotiated a lease on. And what you've achieved is a fully hands-off investment.
So with that works out to be, so we're looking at a 4-bedroom that we can convert to a 6-bedroom. Now the cost of conversion. So when we approach that, real estate agent or that owner online, and we say, hey, can we rent it out? So it would normally be renting for what on realestate.com? Maybe $550.
You could say $500-600 for 4 bedrooms. They're going to be a little bit less.
So
depends on the age of the property, but.
Fantastic. So we'd go and then fit it out to rent each of the rooms at $280 per room times 6.
Yeah.
What would be the cost to take that and convert it and have it set up, including the furniture and everything, to be able to just go, okay, everything's fitted out, hand it over to the property manager that's managing it for 15%. What would be the cost from me talking to the owner to do the rent for rent to the point where I hand the key to the property manager to rent it?
Got it. For 9 bedrooms, and I'm going to go back there because I can just tell you a quick reference point, and this is going to cover all the way back down to 6 bedrooms. So we'll spend 30 to 40 grand. Once you learn how to do this, so when I coach my students, what I do is I teach them how they can focus on getting renovations done at a good price, so they get sort of builders rates on it, and you'll be able to spend 30 to 40 grand creating a 9 bedroom. That's including all of your furniture costs in the room, which is usually $1,000 per piece, and that's the variable. If you only had 6 rooms, you'd take off, 6, 7, 8, 9, you take off 3 grand. You'd save 3 grand on furnishing costs doing a 6 bedroom.
Right.
So it would be 32 grand, something like that. 32 grand to 22 grand, something like that.
So a 30,000...
34 to 24 grand.
So let's say, let's go maximum.
Yeah.
So 34?
Yeah.
So let's say 34K, and that 34K is for trades and fit out.
Yeah, and compliance.
And then...
so walls, obviously.
And walls, yeah. So put up starboard, gyprock, TV, beds, study, desk, chair.
Right.
And then what is compliance as a number? That's included in that cost, but what is compliance typically for something like that? And do you have to fit it out with cameras?
Yeah.
What's the...
Cameras are suggested. You got to think about this like an apartment block. I'll touch on the cameras first and then we'll go back to the compliance. But think about an apartment block. If you rented something in Queensland, Brisbane, or the Sunshine Coast, and you rent an apartment block, you wouldn't be shocked to walk into the lobby at the start of that and see a camera before you get to the elevator, right? Think about these rooming houses the same as that. It's where there's a body corporate, which is essentially it's not a literal body corporate, but you will be managing those areas. You'll take control of cleaning those. You can set the cameras up there. You can go through anytime you need to, and the tenant only rents the room. Just like in the apartment block, when you go into the lobby, you go to your apartment. That's where you have your privacy and stuff like that. So it uses that concept. So the answer is yes, you can use cameras, and they're really effective for making sure that there's harmony at the house.
100%. Now, the reason I asked that is because I've actually had a meeting with someone who has many, many rooming houses across Victoria, and he's described some of the horror stories of what's going on.
Yeah.
Some tenants, burning the beds and a bunch of stuff going on, which is too crazy to say right now. But he's got cameras in around the house and everything, just to know when something's going on.
Right.
He can notify the property manager straight away. Yeah. So obviously this must be in an area it's a little bit rough. There might be some drugs involved and stuff like that. So do you encounter this, and how do you, as an experienced rent-to-rent guy? Rent-to-rent guy? Rent-to-rent expert.
$1 million renter.
$1 million renter. So, from your experience, how do you go about, mitigating that risk?
Yeah, so it comes back to the demographics you're going to get in these places. And you can choose. Like if you started a business, you can choose who you're going to serve. And how you would dictate that would be based on a few things, like how you packaged it up, where you set it up, who you actually took on as clients, and the price point. So they're the same variables that are included in the property management. So if you go for a premium product that's going to be $20 more or $50 more than your average, crap shack, right? And you got a TV in there, you put some time into it. Yeah. Things professionally cleaned. Yeah. You can weed out any riffraff if you wanted to, just based on that price factor. The other thing would be the level of care in the management systems, which is why you want to get training. So I coach my students to manage these things professionally at a really high level, and that's why we don't get any of those issues.
Yep.
I've had some horror stories in the past before I set up all of these systems, right? I've been doing this for 8 years now, and I want to give the people that I coach, and hopefully some viewers here today, the lessons without the scars, just by knowing and doing the due diligence to set it up right, and choosing. If you're not going to manage it yourself, you've got to choose the right person to manage it who has systems. Conventional property management won't work. because it doesn't cut it to go down there every 3 months and just get the guys to send you an email if there's an issue and let anyone in. You know, if the property manager you get on just decides, it's only going to be riff-raff, then they're going to be dialed in to let that stuff in. You know what I mean? It's like when you start thinking about a certain car and you see it everywhere you drive. If a property manager thinks this is a crap place, there's only going to be crap people coming in, then they're going to be primed to start letting crap people in, or there's just not a care factor there. So the price, quality of it, and who you've got managing it. You could have a really low quality and still only let in high quality tenants just by checking references and like pay slips. You know, making sure that they've got a job. Like if they've held down a job for 12 months, probably not going to try and set fire to the bed because they've got other things going on. But if they just got out of jail, it's going to be different. Perhaps they don't care. Perhaps they go on a bender and they cause issues. Now, I would love for people to make space for whatever their heart tells them to do with the rooming house space. If you go in and you say, I'm going to do, abused women's shelter, it's only going to be for women over 40. I mean, that's a heartfelt mission. And same for, I'm going to help rehabilitate people from X. There's room for that. I'm going to help solve homelessness. There's room for that. But there's probably going to be issues with that stuff. If you say, I'm going to create accommodations for students and working professionals in areas of demand, then the mindset shifts and you start looking for a different criteria of people. So it really comes down to planning. I'm going to assume that this guy has just sort of got an anything goes mentality to an extent, right? And he's happy enough with doing that. It's like Centrelink pays the bills and they pay every fortnight on time, and I'm happy with that.
So that's the centre pay, right?
That's
you're talking
centre
about.
pay,
So
right.
so that's when someone on Centrelink gets paid. So you can opt to have that. So it comes directly out of their Centrelink pay, and then you pay $2 for the
something
processing
like
fee or something like that, and then that way their rent's covered first.
We set that up initially, and then never used it because we just didn't target that market. So it's where it comes down to really dialing in who your dream customer is. And you'd set the rooms up different, the photos and stuff, right? For a student, you'd put a little backpack down, you'd have a MacBook there, maybe some study books before you take your photos. It would look lived in, cozy, and suitable. For the other people, it may not look like that. Maybe you do it differently. But I know that that's how we stage it up because we know who we want to attract. And we mitigate a lot of issues based on that.
Because someone on drugs isn't, coming there to study, right? So
they wouldn't be coming there to study.
Tell me. So going back to, tying into the money that can be made here. So, we go the rent to rent. You spend 35. Let's round it off. Say 35K.
30 to 40 grand.
30 to 40 grand.
Sometimes up to 50, but it just depends.
Depending on what it is, right? So we go 35K. We spend it. We spend the money fitting it out, and then we rent all the rooms out. And let's say we're getting $280. Right. Per room.
I'm not great with maths, but
I'm not either. So I'm hoping that you're going to have the 280 times how many rooms?
If we had, I think it's like 27 or 2,800 a week. If we have 300.
So we've taken that $600 a week. 4-bedroom or 5-bedroom, right?
Yeah.
And then
$1,800 per week.
So $1,800, right?
We're getting $300 a week.
So $1,800. So $1,800 per week. After the fit-out cost of $35,000. That's what you're getting. And with that lease that you would have in place now, because if you're going to spend the $35,000 on that property, you'd want to have a lease in place with that owner to ensure that you now have cash flow for a certain period of time. Now, what does that lease look like for that certain period of time?
Terms are really important. We want to be transparent. That's the goal, right? So if the owner doesn't know what's going on, you hear some people who will go and take a place and put it on Airbnb and think that they're being smart with it, but it makes bad business. So the terms are crucial and being transparent with the owner. We're going to be doing this. I represent a group of investors. We're looking to rent something like this long term, 5 years. 3 to 5 years would work. And, we do the fit out costs and maybe we'll give you a little bit more rent. Make sure they're happy. A good rule for setting these up is that you don't want to try and take everything off the table. You want to make sure they're happy, find out what their goals are, and then once you have the things, either their problems or what they want, then you can help put together a deal that works. So let's say they come to you and they say, I'm not getting as much rent as I want. I'm worried about maintenance. I'm already paying property management and my property manager says it's not a good idea. And then we're like, great, we've got the problems. Well, let's take care of like soft maintenance. You can take care of electrics in the roof and pipes under the floor, right? We'll include that in the lease as part of our fee, as part of our contract. We're going to give you an extra $20 a week in rent or $50 a week in rent. And we're going to also just arrange trades if they need to come through. So you're going to save 10% on property management. So all of a sudden, their spreadsheet looks completely different, totally different. Let's say we're doing a 9-bedroom place and we can afford to put those terms in, the maintenance terms, and we can afford, even in some cases, an extra $100 a week in rent. So now we've gone from being an iffy series of concerns to being the best option on the market.
So you're addressing the owner's worries essentially, and showing them how you're going to take care of them, and offer them a secure lease for X amount of time. And I think that all comes down to your professionalism and what you convey during that negotiation. That's why it's super important to know what you're doing when you're negotiating.
Got it. Yeah. And you also don't want them seething. If you're not transparent and then they find out you're doing the wrong thing, or they're not happy with the deal that they've got there, then it's just not going to be fruitful long term. And you want to be able to, after the first 5 years, if they're a savvy investor, they want long-term tenants, they don't plan on selling. If we talk about that original owner that I got my first lease from, a lot of people are happy with the buy and hold strategy. So there's no reason they won't just keep renewing it. It's 5, 10, 15 years. Yep. All of a sudden you've created this $80,000 income for the next 15 years. You know what I mean? Yep. Just by keeping that owner happy, you've factored in rent increases for them. You've made their life a lot easier, and it's good business. And then you get to create a service for your dream, tenant.
Yeah, of course. So once again, to summarize, when we're spending the $35K to get an $80K income.
Yeah.
And if we can get a 5-year lease on that, we've essentially got our money back without a down payment. We're not actually buying the property.
Yeah,
we're just putting down the $35K.
Right.
We're getting our $35K back essentially in half of the first year. We're getting it back in 6 months or whatever. And then from 6 months on, we're profitable. And then we've got the property for, let's say, a 5-year lease.
Yeah.
So it's nothing but profit from the first 6 months onward for.
It can be. So if it's a $50,000 reno, then it looks different again.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll redo carpets and stuff. Maybe you have to do an extra bathroom. We shy away from bathrooms, but the numbers can change depending on that.
Bathrooms will set you back.
Bathrooms
are the worst. They're the worst one. I hate bathrooms.
Yeah, and for us, for me, I'd actually started setting these up for $40,000, and then I'd sell them on for $80,000. So if it can make $80,000 in a year, I'd sell it to someone. I'd do like a reno flip. I'd set it up for 40, sell it for 80, or 70, and make 30 to 40 grand. And maybe they've got it for 12 or 14 months before it becomes profitable, but they don't have to do any of the work. So what that allows me to do, because you've asked, people don't have the deposit, what can they do now? They can go and do a deal like that where they get chunks of money down, like they find someone who's willing to buy one of these, and you just do drawdowns throughout the project. So it's the first $40,000 or the first $20,000 for you to start the project. Once you learn this skill, and you draw down the cash all the way through the project and then clear the balance at the end. So what you've done effectively, and what I do, and I've done for my clients that are involved in my deal selling network, some of my coaching students, I'll sell their projects on for them, and it will be that 30, 40 grand profit. And they've essentially done that without having that initial money they needed to set that up. So it's a way to start getting deposits and chunks of cash. Because if you can make 40 grand in 60 days or 90 days, then it can be a real game changer for someone. It's like, cool, we'll do 2 at a time. That's not unreasonable. I've done 2 or 3 of these at a time.
And then you do those 2, 3 at a time, and that gets you your deposit. That gets you a deposit for your personal or your first property, right? To get you on the property ladder. So, mate, I really, really like that. Mate, appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
And mate, it's been a great insight.
Cool.
Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Property Banter. That's part 1 of Rent to Rent with Vincent Holthouse. We have part 2 coming up. Make sure you check that out. Please like, share, subscribe to Property Banter, and we'll see you soon.